Dave Palumbo here with an RX Muscle exclusive. I'm joined today by a man you might know. He's been in our fitness industry probably longer than I have, or just about as long as I have. He runs a very successful fitness factory where he coaches a lot of women athletes and male athletes for that matter. He's run the Arnold Amateur contest for many, many years up until this past year. And we got him here today. We're going to talk a little bit about bodybuilding, promoting bodybuilding, and what happened with the Arnold Amateur, the man I'm talking about, Mike Davies. Welcome to the show.
All right, thanks, Dave. Glad to be here.
Now, Mike, when did you get into the sport? I'm trying to think of who was in it longer, me or you.
I think me, unfortunately. I remember when you hit the scene, you know, with that freaky look and that dry, you know, vascular, crazy look, you know. So I think 1996, I got into the industry when Wally Boyko started the fitness stuff. So I was all the way back in the Wally Boyko days.
I have you beat. I was in there a little earlier, 1990s when I started competing. But I think both of us kind of like were starting to be very well known around those days. And you got in really with fitness, right? I mean, because that was when did fitness first start? What year was that?
I'm going to say it was around that 95, 96.
Yeah.
With Wally Boyko. And then, you know, Jim Lorimer picked it up at the Arnold and called it the Miss International. And it wasn't an IFBB NPC. It wasn't an IFBB event. It was Wally Boyko's event.
Yeah. What was it called? The Miss
Fitness International.
Oh, no, but what was the organization that was running?
What, Ms. It was a Ms. Fitness? MS Fitness?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
and for years it was unsanctioned because the NPC didn't do it and the IFBB didn't want to do it, I guess, you know.
Right. Well, I mean, we saw that turned out. I mean, once they jumped on boarding, you know, we went from men's and women's bodybuilding to men's, women's bodybuilding and fitness. I mean, I remember going to my first nationals. There was like 53 girls in one class. You know, it was crazy. You know?
The routines would take like 3 hours to get through everyone's routine, right?
Oh yeah, it was nuts. It was nuts, but I still enjoyed it. I loved it back in the day when we had the 1 piece, the 2 piece, the cat suit, 45-second round, and then the 2-minute round. I mean, you had to be an athlete. You had to have some endurance. You had to make it through a day of serious competition.
You forgot one thing. Don't you remember they used to have the something like they do push-ups or they would do
they had a fitness round. Exactly.
They had a fitness round. They're real, like you actually had to do something. Yeah.
Well, the problem with that is that there was, you know, it wasn't subjective, to be honest with you. Because you could have somebody who was a great athlete and could get on the rower and do 70 reps in a minute and then be up at the top of the leaderboard, but her physique and everything else sucked, you know?
Right.
So,
but, I mean, it even the playing field a little bit, you know?
It did. It was different. Like 1 year at the Arnold, they had this thing where you had this reaction pad where you stood on this pad and these lights would run up and you'd run up and, you know, and have to step on it and everything else.
I said to myself, if I had to do that, like, because while I was competing, I would have fallen on my face and probably broken my neck. I said, I don't know how these girls were really good at it too.
Yeah, actually, I mean was the foundation of my training back then. Was to build these girls into athletes, and I would go out and recruit these cheerleaders and these, you know, athletes. And people used to ask me all the time, "What do you look for?" And I'd say, "Tomboys. I'm looking for tomboys," because I could train them tough, I could talk to them tough, you know, and I come from a coaching background, so. You know, I could MF them a little bit, and they wouldn't break down and cry and walk out of the gym on me all the time.
Absolutely.
You know,
the fitness girls are the toughest. I always say it because they got to do the routine. They got to work out. They got to do their cardio, but then they also got to do the routine, which takes double the time of everything else.
And it tears their bodies up.
Yeah,
it does. I mean, my own wife, Julie Palmer. I've been married to Julie. Her and I've been together for 23 years, and you know, she still suffers from neck pain and stuff like that from her fitness days.
Yeah. Did she ever have any serious injuries in doing her routine?
No, you know, the neck thing was the worst, but that was an ongoing, you know, nerve pain and all that stuff. And we've had to treat her over the years. You know, she blew out an ankle once, but nothing, you know, just wear and tear. Nothing major ever happened. Thank God. But that can't be said. There's a lot of girls with torn ACLs and everything else.
Sure. Who is, Adela tore ACL, didn't she?
Yeah, Adela had a bad tear, and then for 2 years we couldn't get that leg back.
Yeah.
You know, it took a long time to rehab her and get her back to where she was, balanced and could do everything she had done before.
She was going to make a comeback, wasn't she? Like last year or something like that. What
you know what? We got back together and
you did. I didn't even know that. Okay.
And yeah, and things were going well. She was coming up here and doing working, training and stuff with me, and she had a real bad bicep tendon and we didn't know if it was, labrum or whatever. And it ended up, it's a labrum tear, which, as you know, is nasty. And as far as doing a routine, that type of stuff. And at age, I think Adela's 52 now.
I know.
Is it worth it? Is it worth it? It probably wasn't. But, she wanted to do it for her mentally, but she's gotten herself in a much better place. And I think that was a catalyst to try to, to get her back into, fitness, feeling good about herself, and just kind of getting back out there.
People don't realize she's the winningest, right? Fitness Olympia champ of all time. What, she have eight championships?
Yeah, we spent in our 12 years together, she won 8 Miss Olympias.
No one, I don't think anyone will ever break that record.
No, I don't think, not in fitness.
No.
You don't see the girls that don't have the longevity today. Even the bikini girls don't have longevity.
Yeah.
And I think that's more to do with the competition. It's just so fiercely competitive.
Right. Yeah. Now, and you've been around since the beginning. Who was the best routine wise, not physique necessarily? Who had the best routine of all time in your mind?
Oh man,
I have my favorites, but I want to see what you say.
But I think the greatest routine I ever saw, honestly, was before the IFBB days, and it was Kelly Ryan's Popeye routine. I know that's a really big blast from the past, but man, I'll tell you what, Kelly, back in the day when, she was first coming up, she was unreal.
Yeah.
Entertainment wise, I think my girl, Jenny Hendershot, was probably one of the best of all time.
I was going to say Jenny. It had to be Jenny or it had to be Kelly. Those are the two best.
Yeah. Let me tell you this. Jenny Hendershot is one of the best athletes I've ever trained. And, I'm not a one-trick pony, dude. Like currently I have 17 kids playing Division I football. Oh, I have 2 guys that I've been working with since middle school that are in the NFL now. So I train a lot of athletes, and Jenny, it was a hell of an athlete. One time a guy saw us in Boulder, Colorado. She was there on a guest posing, and we were working out and we were doing a bunch of athletic stuff. And they literally were going to invite her to try out for the Olympic team in the long jump. And she had never long jumped in her life. That'll tell you how, that chick was explosive. Explosive as hell. I'm telling you. Jenny can do anything you asked her to do.
I've never seen a routine like that in my life. My wife's was an elite level gymnast, and she was like, Jenny's the best. Because she can do it all. And she was a cheerleader, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's how we met. We met in cheerleading. I came from a cheerleading background, and what happened is I was doing promotions just like I would be doing, promoting an Arnold or a show like that. I was promoting cheerleading competitions. Right. And I worked for a company that did the camp programs and all that, and Jenny was one of the instructors. And I competed in bodybuilding from the time I was 19. So that was in 1985. I was 19 years old. I did my first show.
Gotcha.
I met Jenny in, I think, 95.
Oh, that long ago. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We went way back. But I'm telling you, man, that chick, a hellacious athlete.
She was just the energy. When I see her energy, I say to myself, why can't these girls have that same energy on stage today? I just don't see it,
They're too big, dude. They're rocked out. Look at them. Their muscularity and stuff.
Right.
Come on. My wife, Julie, Jenny, Kelly, those girls couldn't stand up there physically with the girls today.
Right. So they what you're saying is they sacrificed their ability to move because of that.
I think so, yeah. Especially move explosively and fast.
I noticed that Oxana Grashina's routine slowed down recently, and I wonder if that had something to do with the fact that she got too big,
Well, man, Oxana's, she came on the scene. Listen, I'll put her in that conversation, Oxana's routines, and I'll tell you what, she did this I think it was Meatloaf, like Wolf with the Red Rose routine one year at the Arnold. And I looked at every one of my girls and I said to them, and I had about 10 of them there doing the Arnold that year. And I was like, y'all better strap it up because that's the future. Because that chick, the theatrics, it wasn't athletic as like a Jenny or a Kelly, but it had it had something different.
Yes.
And it was special. I'll tell you that. So I'll throw her hat in the ring too. Those 3 were the 3 best ever. Hands down.
I'll put
Oxana in there too.
Yeah, I go along with that. All right, let's talk promotion, because you've been promoting shows for how many years now?
22.
It's a long time. I mean, so you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? And you've seen the sport grow from 2 divisions, women's bodybuilding, men's bodybuilding, to 3 with fitness, and then figure, and then bikini, and then men's physique and classic physique and wellness. I mean,
the explosion. Exactly.
Yeah. Which, you know, makes it that much more difficult as a promoter, because you have to make sure the show runs efficiently. Everyone gets taken care of. There's more people backstage. It's a lot. The logistics of it are a lot tougher.
Yeah, a lot different. Correct.
Not to mention, people don't realize it's not just the day of the show that it's the preparation. It's taking the applications. It's NPC cards. It's making sure everyone is signed up, because there's always someone who slips through the cracks. And,
absolutely.
And has a nervous breakdown and probably calling you up frantically, you know. So
yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. There really are. There really are.
Now, when did the Lormers approach you to do the Arnold Amateur? Because for years there was no amateur event, and then all of a sudden they decided we're going to hold an amateur event at the Arnold Classic, and you know, because we're going to give pro cards away.
Yeah, and I want to say 2007 was the first year, I believe, and we didn't have pro cards that year.
Right.
And at that time, the first one was an NPC event only.
Okay.
All right. And we drew very well, even though we didn't have a pro card up for grabs. We still drew like 403 competitors.
Wow. Okay.
Bob Lormer and I have been partners in the Ohio State Championships for years.
Right.
For like 22 years.
Bob is Jim Lormer's son, just for people who don't know.
Yeah. And we can go through a little bit of that history.
Sure.
Yeah, Bob and I have been partners for 22 years. We also own gyms together. So, you know, we've been partners in different business ventures for years. We've been friends since I was like 18. Mm-hmm. And Bob, what am I? I'm 58. Bob's 62. I think he's 4 or 5 years older than me. So, you know, we started way back then. And then he came to me because I always laugh and talk about, listen, I'm the nuts and bolts guy. I'm the guy who gets shit done. So Bob's always had me, you know, in the kitchen doing the work. And I don't mind it, dude. And that's what I do best. I do logistics really well. I deal with people really well. And, you know, Bob opened a lot of doors for me, and I'll always be grateful for that. You know, I will. And then he's, you know, when it came to the Arnold Amateur, yes, Bob started it and we started it together. But once it grew exponentially and it got too big, and the Arnold Sports Festival got too big and he took on new roles, the Arnold Amateur was my baby. It was my responsibility. And so he trusted me with it, as did Jim Mannion.
Yeah. So they basically just said, that's Bob right there. They just said, hey, Mike, you're doing a great job. You handle the Arnold Amateur. We'll just focus on the pro show, essentially, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, he pretty much had to recuse himself from it. It was just one of those things. It was time, you know. He had more, you know, the sports festival was his thing, and the Arnold Amateur became, you know, my thing pretty much exclusively.
How many people was the biggest event you ever had at the Arnold Amateur?
You're going to laugh. It was the year of the pandemic. The year we got shut down, we had 818 people registered.
Oh my God. Wow.
Now, granted, not everybody made it into town that year, but listen, I think 700 made it in. Mm-hmm. And we, as you know, we got the show to go off, but we didn't get any spectators.
Right. They weren't allowing people the state wasn't allowing anyone to.
Yeah, that was all state. And that was so dirty. That whole situation was dirty. I was in there in those negotiations, and the Lormers were in there, and Arnold had representation in there. Daniel was there, and it was just, they would tell us one thing in one room, and they'd walk over to the microphone and say something totally different.
Oh my God.
That night, I got an email at like 12:30 at night, and it said that they, meaning the mayor of Columbus or whatever, they would be in court at 9 a.m. to shut down all spectators and all spectator sports. And we had a line of people out the door waiting to come into the Arnold Amateur when basically the police and the health department showed up at the convention center and sent everybody home.
Wow. That's crazy.
But, you know, the show went on.
Right.
And, you know, and it was eerie. It was weird. But you know what? The competition was fierce. I give it that. And the athletes did a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
You know, because everybody was kind of, you know, panicking and a little bit of fear, as you might understand.
Yeah, of course.
But Dave, I'll tell you what the worst thing was from that year. The worst thing was my wife crying backstage, thinking that, are we going to be okay? Because this is, a huge loss. And this is, beside that, it was, I had to tell some of these athletes that the governor absolutely banned. They banned anybody from, Japan, South Korea, Iran. There was there's like a handful of 5 countries that they banned, and those guys were already here.
Oh my God! So what happened? Did they get to compete?
No, those guys. I had to pick them off downstairs before they ever even came up to the registration.
Oh my God!
And inform them that due to political reasons, they were not welcome to compete.
I did not know that. That's something I did not realize, that they actually at the show itself stopped them.
I had to have representatives stop them before they would even come up to registration. And let me tell you, they did not take that shit sitting down. I mean, I got blown up. I got blistered by, their consulates. I mean, their handlers. The way other countries handle some of this stuff is completely different. I mean, a lot of these countries handle their athletes like we handle our Olympic athletes. I mean,
right. They actually value their athletes, right?
Yeah, they have stipends. They fly them over. They pay for everything. Right. I mean, I was being, threatened with lawsuits about, paying for flights and Airbnbs and reimbursing all these people.
Right.
And that part was terrible, because what goes into competing at an international show and a pro qualifying show.
Right.
These guys had trained for months and months for this.
Of course, and I mean, they've flown over here already. They're already here.
Well, that was my argument at the time with the officials. I'm like, you guys are idiots, because these guys are already here. So listen, at least we can have them here and contained, and we know where they're at. But guess where they're at now? They're in your malls. They're in your grocery stores. They're in your theaters. You don't fucking know nothing about them. Stupid. And honestly, the Italians took it the hardest, man. Those guys, I thought I was going to come to fisticuffs with a couple of those dudes.
Us Italians, we're serious about that.
Oh no, they were hot-headed, Dave.
You're lucky you didn't get whacked, Mike.
Hey, you know what? I was walking around looking over my shoulder a couple times because I thought the Italians were going to whack me. Those guys were hot. Hey, you get an Italian crying mad who's carb depleted, water depleted, possibly on some PEDs. That was a bad combination.
That's right. It's crazy that that you just couldn't let him in. I don't know, the whole thing. So do you think that whole pandemic, that whole bad taste, hurt that competition long term? Or
no? Because the next year, as you know, we didn't hold it. Right. Nobody could have anything. The Arnold itself never took place.
Right.
But last year, I forget what it's called. I think it was called Prop 42, or it was our country's, political move to keep everyone out of America. You had to be vaccinated or whatever to even to come in. And I never worked so hard to have so few people at the Arnold.
That sucks.
And here's the thing that nobody understands. And I don't know if any other promoters, I don't think, maybe Gary Udit deals with this, with not so much with Canada and Mexico for the North Americans, because I deal with those people for the Arnold as well. And it's pretty simple. But when you're dealing with somebody from Saudi Arabia or, Dubai or whatever, you're talking about visas. You're talking about, letters to the consulate. You're talking about a lot of red tape and bullshit to get these guys to even be able to compete. And it's, Dave, it's a lot of work, man. And I mean, it's like,
you're doing it. You're the one doing it, right?
I'm the one doing the legwork. Yeah. And it's that stuff that nobody sees. It's the behind the scenes stuff that you have to work so hard on.
Sure.
And there'd be times where, I would have a conversation with somebody who's in the consulate in this country, and I'm up at, 2 a.m. doing it because it's 9 o'clock there.
Yeah, I tell people all the time. People say, Dave, why don't you promote a show? I'm like, it's not so easy to promote a show. I said, that's another full-time job I'd have to have. And I just don't have the time for it. I said, it's a lot of work. It drains you. I'm already busy and stretched everywhere, so.
Yeah. And they think you just roll the stuff out there and, buy some trophies and people sign up. And that's not the case. It was, the biggest it was is kind of when we, the best it was for me ever is when it was just an NPC event. And I'll tell you why. Although, Rafael Santoya from the other faction would bring over a large contingent, 250 to 350 competitors every year.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
They took some proceeds.
Ah, okay.
They would take half of the registration.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, if we could,
how greedy can you be? You're running the show. What they're taking half of your money?
Well, they're taking half of the registration from everybody from the IFBB European faction. So when Mannion broke ties with them, they were now free to come in, and they were paying us. They were registering with us now. So, you know, bless Jim in a lot of ways for that decision, because it was how I started to make some money on the event. Right. Because I want to be honest with you, nobody knows this, and the gate was never mine. I never took $1 from the gate. All the gate always went to the Classic Productions. And Dave, when we first started this thing, the first year we had Bikini Dave, we were still at Vets Memorial. Yeah. We sold it out on a Thursday night.
Oh, shit.
3,700 seats filled.
And you got zero of that? You didn't get any of that money?
None of it. I ran that whole thing off of registration monies.
Oh, so you made registration money. And who paid for all the people who worked the show?
I took care of all that.
Okay. So
I did that. Big risk. Well, no, I did that with volunteers.
Right, but I'm just saying you took a risk in the sense that you invested a lot of time and effort into the fact that you were hoping you'd have a lot of athletes show up. Because,
absolutely.
Because I've seen shows with only 50 people that they sell out the show, and you make money on the seats you sell. But if you don't, you were making all your money on the registration fees.
Yeah, in the 15 years, I never was privy to having that gate ever.
Wow. All right. Well, you know, that they were your partners essentially, is the way it worked out, right?
Yeah, that's how it worked out. You were in partnership. So let's get to
well, I want people to see how this whole thing evolved. Now, at what point did it start falling apart for you, at least before you actually terminated your relationship with them? At what point did you start sensing there was something wasn't working right?
Well, here's the backstory that nobody really knows, and I think it's because the Lormers never made it public.
Okay.
You know, and again, bless Jim's soul. Jim Lormer's like grandfather to me. I mean, he brought me up in the sport along with his son Bob. You know, and without Jim, there'd be so little in the sport with Arnold. It really would be. It was Jim's idea, and it was Jim who masterminded it all, and it was Jim who really was the catalyst for all of it.
And for people who might be living under a rock, Jim Lormer just passed away recently, a few weeks ago, and so he's no longer with us. Okay.
His funeral was this past Tuesday. So they started all of this, and it started to unravel after the pandemic, because there was a break. For the first time, there was dissension amongst the Arnold Classic production, Arnold Productions, which basically was Jim and Bob and Arnold himself. All right. So it came down to, basically a buyout situation. And Arnold bought Jim out and paid Bob and paid the family, and basically took control of the sports festival, i.e. bringing in new people to actually run something that the Lorimer family had ran for 32 years at that time, 33 years.
Right. Now, why do you think that happened? Or maybe why did that happen?
In my opinion, it was a witch hunt. I'm going to tell you, the number one thing they hung their hat on was the Arnold Amateur. And Brian Powers, if you don't know who that is, he's Arnold's, go-to guy. He's the chairman or whatever. He's the man now. He's the one that runs, basically the Arnold Sports Festival. He tried to, he kept on, and this drove me crazy because, I cooperated with this guy at first. He kept on telling me that what Bob and I did was illegal, and we had this underground competition that nobody knew about, that we were, bringing in large sums of money. Uh-huh. And I'll be honest with you, Dave, I had to laugh. I was just like, what are you talking about? Nobody knows about this competition, this underground competition. And every year, Arnold comes and gives away my overall trophies. Every year, I've got pictures of Arnold with all the winners. Every year, we've got our winners on stage Friday and Saturday night being acknowledged in front of the big crowd and being, guests at the pro show. What do you mean nobody knows about this?
Right.
You guys have made all this money, and, Arnold is bodybuilding. He should have been getting all of this. I said, listen, Arnold got the gate for 15 years.
I was
Classic just going to say, Production shared the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy who knows nothing about the sport is telling me, who's been running the show for 15 years, that we've got this underground bullshit show that nobody knew about.
Right.
And I was
you just laid out how the money worked. You kept the registration fees.
Absolutely.
And Arnold and Lorma split the gate. That's
absolutely. It all went into their pie.
Right.
You know, and I never knew anything about the monies, or I never asked about the gate. Why should I? You know what I'm saying?
You weren't getting any of it. Why
that.
wouldn't you? Yeah.
And I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know what I was losing out on or missing out on. But you know what, Dave, I never got into this for money. I've always been in it for the athletes. I was an athlete. My wife was a high-level athlete, and I always wanted to just provide a really good show.
Right.
You know, and, you know, bless Bob and Jim Mannion for trusting me to do that. And I feel like I did it to the best of my ability every year.
Right.
Did you ever hear any complaints about the Arnold Amateur, honestly?
Mike, and I'm not saying that just because I'm interviewing you. All I heard was stellar raves about how great that show was run.
Well, it's just the organization and stuff. And I had, you know, I'd built so many relationships throughout the world, you know, from when from the time when, you know, Raphael would bring his people over, and Jim and I and Raphael, we all worked together on it. I built really strong relationships. So even when Jim and Raphael's relationship, you know, went sideways, I still had all those contacts. I still had all those relationships, and I could still reach out to those people and get athletes from other countries to come in and, you know, join in this awesome competition, you know. And we didn't give away, you know, 120 pro cards or nothing. We got 7.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, the people who won our overalls have all gone on to the pros and kicked ass.
Yeah, and you know what I got to stop you a second. The weird thing about this whole thing is that why, you know, let's say Arnold buys out Bob and Jim, and I'm sure they didn't want that, but from what I heard, there was no option at that point. Now, why wouldn't they keep you on? Because if you're making tons of money for them, ostensibly, why wouldn't they keep you, let you run this show, collect your registrations, then they're going to keep collecting the gate, now 100% of the gate, because they don't have a partner anymore, right? Yeah. Or I don't know what was the reason for getting rid of you. That's what I never understood.
Well, I think the only reason they kept me on, I was the last of, you know, I was last of the old guard. I mean, I was the only link to Bob, to be honest with you. I mean, I think a lot of it was they wanted to, you know, they just wanted to crash and burn anything that was Bob Lorimer, which is total bullshit. You know, I don't agree with the way that Jim was treated in all this. You know, Dave, I'll be honest with you, I'm salty about it. I'm bitter about it. The way the family was treated. And these are people I've been, you know, close with for, like I said, 30 some years, 34 years. So, I think they kept me in there last year because they didn't know they knew they didn't have to, that was one facet they didn't have to worry about. Okay. Because you've got people coming in from Comic-Con who don't know anything about bodybuilding, and they're basically trusting 2 holdovers from the Lorimer Classic Productions, which is Lloyd, I don't even know Lloyd's last name, Daniels, I think, and another gentleman, Brett Lalonde. And, you know, these guys might have known some of the athletes and some of the undergoings of all of it. They didn't know anything about the amateur.
Sure.
And I think what we're finding out is that maybe they didn't know, they know even less than I thought, because now the show's canceled for 2023.
What? Yeah. Why?
You know, when a lot of people think, oh, Mike, you're vindicated. I'm like, you know what? I'm not vindicated. It's something I built for 15 years. You know, when I built it for
the ones who are suffering.
I built that shit for Jim, you know, Mannion, because once it was an NPC event, for me, it was always an NCC event. I always treated Raphael with respect and stuff, but I always fought to keep the integrity of the NPC, you know, because you know, yes, it's an international show, but it's here in the States.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You know,
and now they have NPC worldwide, so it's everywhere. Right. So, you know,
it's everywhere now. And I think that kind of hurt me last year, that you could get a pro card by staying closer to home. You didn't have to make that big travel over here.
Mike, you know what? I was just saying, we were talking on the phone the other day, and I said, you know what? If they held this Arnold Amateur event back in the 90s, when there was 2 pro cards, one at Nationals, one at USA, maybe 3, and one at North American, if they held it, because it wasn't held every year, people would have come in droves to do this show for another opportunity to get a pro card. I don't understand why this show, it should sell itself with all the pro cards they're giving away. I mean, it's not an enormous amount, but it's enough that it should we shouldn't have to depend on Europe and the Middle East. The United States people should do this show. I don't get it. It's the only show in the beginning of the year. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that maybe it's too early in the season. That's the only thing that maybe might be a detraction from it.
You know, well, as a coach, and as you know, I mean, it's not easy to get somebody ready for the Arnold, pro or amateur. And I've been doing it
because you got to diet through the holidays. You know.
Yeah, I've been doing it for years, and I tell you what, I started everybody ever had do the Arnold Amateur, the Pro Arnold. I started their diet the day after Thanksgiving.
Nah, yeah, me too. Yeah, me
you know,
too.
I always started the day after Thanksgiving because you're going to be ahead. And a lot of people wait to see if they're going to get in, and they don't even make that announcement until I think this upcoming week. And man, it's too late. Then you've got, you know, oh, you're going to diet down in 9 weeks. Bag that shit. I'm not doing that. If you can't be on time, be early. You know. So
why cancel the show, which we know made money every year? It was an attraction. I mean, you have slap fighting at the Arnold. You know, why would you cancel what makes bodybuilding bodybuilding? I mean, the amateur show it was great because every year the winner, especially of the men's, I don't know if it goes for all the divisions, gets an invite the following year to the Arnold Classic. Pro event. I mean, it was such a great title to have.
That was everybody's thing, and that's another reason why I think that Jim always held off on giving us, you know, a bunch of pro cards. Is we got, you know, we got 2 for bikini and 2 for men's physique because those divisions extremely competitive, as you know, and the numbers were always, you know, pretty, you know, they were huge. But you know, it was, if you won, you got an automatic bid to compete the following year, and a lot of people took advantage of that. Some didn't, but a lot did.
Ruley Winkler, I remember that.
Yeah,
that's where he came to notoriety. But so why? Let's speculate. You obviously don't know the exact reason. I don't think anyone knows. Except
I don't have any. You know, I haven't had any. I haven't spoken to Brian Powers at all since, you know, we kind of parted ways, and we did that via an email. And you know that was
there was no competition. He's saying the same thing he did. Why he canceled the women's the figure division, the pro figure division. He said the competition wasn't good and they weren't interested. And meanwhile, you had the whole top Olympia lineup there the year before, you know, including Miss Olympia. So I don't, you know, the women were really upset when they canceled that.
Well,
for good reason.
Well, here you go. You've got somebody who's not in the bodybuilding world who's trying to run this major sport in bodybuilding and making decisions like that. And I think it's total horseshit. I think a lot of people think it's horseshit. You know what I'm saying? There's
no way they're going to lose money with the Arnold Amateur. So why not hold it? Even if you don't make quite the amount you expected to make, it's still, you're providing something that has a history, you know, of being done every single year. And of course, we know that it took a hit after the pandemic, and it still hasn't recovered yet, but it will, just like everything else does. It doesn't make any sense.
Dave, I'll be totally honest with you now. When, you know, basically the decision was made for, you know, them to move on away from me, you know, a lot of stuff was, you know, people were saying everything. Oh, you know, you got, you know, a lot of people were blaming Jim and the NPC and all that stuff. I put that to rest with one phone call with Jim. Jim sent me an email. Hey, Mike, I hear you think I'm the one that, you know, basically pushed you out from the Arnold, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I wish we could have talked about it. Well, I picked up the phone and called him, and we talked about it because I was hearing it from everybody, you know. People were calling me, blah, 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 from all over the world, you know. And you know what? I take Jim at his word. I talked to Jim that day, and we buried it, you know. And you know what? I'll tell anybody this. If Jim wanted me not to be the man running that, all he would have done is had to ask. If Jim needed me to step down, I would have stepped down. Okay? There's 2 people I've always been fiercely loyal to in this industry. It's been Jim Manion and Jim Lorimer. Bottom line. You know, Bob as well. You know, I throw Bob in there too. Bob and I are like brothers.
Would you?
I'm like his little brother. He likes to shit on sometimes, but you know, I've got a lot of love. I got a lot of love for Bob, and I always will, and I'm always going to have Bob's back as well.
I always had a good relationship with Bob, so
you know, so that, you know, that goes without saying. So I, you know, it wasn't a Jim thing. It was I kind of knew that my days were numbered in September when they did the September Arnold. There was a lot of stuff going on, and there was a lot of miscommunication, or actually no communication.
Sure.
And I got a call from Brian Powers one day and asking me if I was speaking to Jim Manion and Gary Udit. And I was like, yeah, I spoke to him this morning. Why? And he was just like, nobody's to be, you know, you're not to speak to them. You're not to speak to Jim Manion at all. I said, wait a second. I said, you know, Brian, they're calling me because they don't have any information about the show. So whoever you've got, you know, they're supposed to come over here on Thursday. They have no information. This was like Monday morning.
Oh my God.
And you know what? The dude in his, you know, in his ultimate arrogance screamed at me and told me the next time I speak to Jim Manion, if I ever, you know, speak to Jim Manion again about anything Arnold, I'll never work another day for the Arnold. And I literally said, you know, I don't know who the fuck you think you're talking to, but I'm not on your payroll. I wasn't on their payroll. I never got a check from them. I wasn't even being promised that I was going to be the promoter at the Arnold Amateur at that time.
Right.
So, I mean, I knew my days were numbered pretty much then, because from that point forward, I never once spoke to Brian Powers again.
That's so weird. I mean,
I dealt directly with, one of the guys in the office, Brett Lalonde. Yeah. And again, they knew I knew what I was doing. Everything was already plugged in. And I wasn't going to get registration last year. I didn't get registration. I didn't even know if I was going to get paid going in.
Wow.
To it. So I was basically a hired gun.
Did you get paid?
I ultimately did. But I mean, I think, a lot of people had to stick their neck out for me to get paid.
Wow.
Because honestly, but the reason I was doing it too is, like, number one, I'm not going to let the athletes down. I don't give a shit if there was 800 or 80. Yeah. They were going to come there and have the same experience that everybody had the previous 15 years.
Sure.
Okay. I wasn't going to stick, Jim or Gary or anybody else with this huge undergoing, because I think I can speculate too that they all found out that there was a lot more to this show than just plugging stuff back in. Mm-hmm. For instance, one of the things I think could possibly have happened, and I don't know, I haven't communicated with Gary, and I did tell Gary from the start, listen, if you need any help, just even direction or, contacts or whatever, call me. I'll help you, because I know how big, and this is my town, dude.
So essentially, Gary Udit was supposed to be running this show.
Yeah, Gary. Right? Yeah, Gary was going to be the one to promote it, and he put it up with Gary Udit Productions and stuff. But I saw that he was having the same problems I was having. Like the Arnold Classic themselves, they weren't doing any advertising.
Right.
We didn't even decide that they were going to do the amateur last year until November 13th, and then they announced it. From the time they announced it, Dave, until the show, they never advertised the Arnold Amateur for me. Now, I had a social network at the time of about 1.4 million through, Twitter and like Muscle Mayhem helped me out, and some of the other, platforms were helping me out promoting. But the Arnold Classic has like 5.4 million.
Right.
People in all their social, and they never did one freaking ad. And I called them out on that afterwards. I said, you guys are bitching about the numbers. What did you do to help? Nothing. Right. They did nothing to help. And we were on top. And I told you I was behind the 8 ball because I couldn't get any of these people in.
Rather than sit down, why wouldn't they just sit down with you and say, hey, let's figure out how we're going to market this thing? I mean, that would have been the smart thing to do.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they thought that somebody could do it better, which is okay. I understand. And that's what a lot of people were trying to,
So they hired Gary Udit to do it, and then they canceled the show. Well, Gary's a great promoter too. I mean, he promotes the Nationals, for God's sakes, and the Masters Nationals, and the North American.
Well, here's the only thing I could speculate on that, okay? And I want people to understand this too. And I was blessed all those years. I had a team of volunteers like nobody's business, dude. Right. They were all locals. They all know what they're doing. They've done all my shows with me for 22 years, pretty much.
Okay.
So I would plug those people in, and they never asked for anything. Wow. They just wanted to be a part of the Arnold Amateur. Right. And in a lot of ways, they didn't want to let myself or my wife down. And we're eternally grateful to those people. Mm-hmm. And that part of me losing this position, I mean, that hurt me there too, because, those people look forward to that.
Sure.
And you would think, who's going to look forward to standing on their feet and, doing a 4-day show, and all this other stuff, and, the parking and the getting down there and all that stuff. But you know what? They did it. They loved it. And, they were always grateful for the opportunity. And I was always so grateful for them. So I can speculate, though, that if Gary has to bring in everybody, he's going to bring in his A team. He's going to bring in Ricky and Andy Bartolovich and Tony and the people that he trusts. But that's going to be at an exorbitant cost to the Arnold.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Think about it. I mean, you're paying for 10 judges, a head judge, and expediters, and blah, blah, blah. You're buying 22 hotel rooms.
Right. And they're paying Gary as an employee, as opposed to Gary, making money off of,
right.
Like he did. Yeah.
Doing it differently. Yeah. And that's basically how it went down. Like, I mean, that's how I would think it was going to go down anyway, right. That, Gary would bring in his own people, and it would be at a cost to the Arnold Classic. Sure. And, that's a big nut, dude. That's a big nut. It really is. I mean, I stressed over it every year to pay the judges what they're worth, and to pay the expediters, on stage, Rick and Tony and those guys that I always trusted. And I would never want anybody else doing the show. It was a lot of money. And I just don't think, you know, that they have anybody in that office that understood all that, you know, because I went about doing it the way I had always done it with volunteers. And now you're going to put out extra 30 here, 30 there. And if they weren't getting big numbers.
But Mike, we're only in the beginning of December. Wasn't it a little premature to cancel? I mean, because when did you get the most signups normally?
Well, we always had our cutoff date at January 31st. And I'll tell you what, there was times that last 3 days I would get 150 registered.
I mean, that's people wait till the last minute. They don't know.
They wait for the last second. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially now in this day and age when you get online and you do it.
Right.
You know, back in the day when people were sending stuff in and you were getting mail and it has to be postmarked and all, that was one thing. But now you could have 70 people signed up and then jump in there the next night and there'd be 170. And that had happened. And I was really surprised if it was a numbers game. I was surprised that they pulled it that quick.
It just feels like the Arnold has been reducing the physique aspect of the Arnold while increasing the sports aspect of the sports festival part of it. And I guess it's leaving a bad taste in people's mouths. I mean, they got rid of figure, they got rid of women's physique, women's bodybuilding and 212 were already gotten rid of in the past, which I don't know why they would get rid of 212 bodybuilding when that.
Dude, 212 is probably one of my favorite divisions.
Yeah. And
212 is the closest to, you know, the 90s look that we'll ever see again. Cause he's got, you know, I mean, they're a bunch of Rich Gasparis walking around up there.
Right.
I mean, they're in shape. They're rock freaking hard, you know.
But what message does that send, Mike, when you get rid of all those divisions and then you just get rid of the whole amateur division, the whole amateur show? I mean, it seems like, hey, you know, we really don't care that much about bodybuilding. We're more interested in the expo and the sports festival.
Well, it tells me that they don't care about the foundation of the Arnold Sports Festival, and they don't care about what Jim Lorimer built over that 34 years. Yeah. Okay, and the decisions that are being made are just, to me, are just egregious. And you know, the Lorimer family, they don't deserve this shit, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it sickens me that, you know, Arnold has let, you know, this, I don't want to say it's tarnished Jim's legacy. I don't want to say that because I think Jim's legacy is cemented, especially here in Columbus, for what he's done for Columbus and all the money that family has put into the economy here.
Right.
I mean, Dave, that event's worth about anywhere from $49 to $54 million.
Wow.
When the Lormers did that shit for 34 years here.
Right.
And now you've got outsiders who don't care nothing about Columbus, don't give two shits. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Who are running an event in Columbus that doesn't really matter to them. And then, you know, you basically are spitting on, you know, the foundation of, you know, remember, this started with a bodybuilding show.
Right.
I was at the very first one. I don't know if you were, Dave, but I was. No. And I remember the expo being in the D Hall at Betts Memorial. And it was like some of the local shows are now.
Yeah, no, but, I went to a couple Arnolds where they were in that same D Hall.
Yeah. And then, but you know, and we were at Vets, and that was a great situation. It was always sold out, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
But the foundation started with bodybuilding, and that was the one thing that, you know, Jim and Bob were always going to preserve bodybuilding. No matter what else happened, bodybuilding was going to be preserved.
Yeah. Do you see them ever moving it? Well, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Mike.
The relationships between, like, you know, Jim and Bob and Jim Mannion, you know, we're always on the same. They're always on the same page. You know, Jim would come over here, you know, at times and drive over and sit down. And, you know, everybody go to lunch and make sure everybody's on the same page. And, you know, it was always the same history lesson from Jim Lorimer. And, it was always kind of cool. It's always kind of the same meeting year after year after year. But nonetheless, though, that's how important it was to Jim Lorimer.
Right.
You know, and Jim Mannion, you know, he's always protected the integrity of that as well. And it just really, it's painful to see where our sport is right now, Dave, between, you know, recently we've gotten, you know, into the mainstream is starting to chime in on things that have happened in our industry.
Right.
You know, this, like you're talking about, I'm saying you've got a Comic-Con guy who's running the second largest, most important show in the world in bodybuilding. And he doesn't come from bodybuilding. He doesn't understand bodybuilding. And I'm sure that, I'll speculate that Gary and Jim probably had a hard time dealing with Brian and trying to figure this all out. And maybe that's one of the reasons it got pushed.
Maybe Brian should have just been in I'm sure he's going to handle the expo really well. Maybe they should have put him in charge of the expo and gotten another person to run the bodybuilding, because I don't think he understands necessarily, you know, the sport itself, because to say the figure girls weren't invested or that the competition wasn't high caliber was a very foolish statement to make, because we had the Olympia lineup there every single year. So
I know. I think that was a total cop out.
Yeah,
that was a cop out. But
it would have been more honest to say, you know, we're trying to save money. You know, when we're cutting back. That would have been a better way to be. I think it would have been honest, and at least people would have said, all right, you know what are we gonna do? We can't argue with them. You know, they got to run a business here. But my thing is, do you think they'll ever move? Do you see them moving this thing out of Columbus?
Well, yeah, I do, because I can tell you right now, they do not have a contract for 2024.
Oh, really?
Yeah, listen, I'm still connected. Trust me. I mean, I kind of laugh. Don't take this the wrong way. This is my town. I do live here. Yeah. Yep. You know what I'm saying? That's like, you know, me going, you know, that's like me trying to go over and do something like this in Pittsburgh, you know, without using my resources with a Jim or a Gary or any of the people over there. You know, I would have lobbied to be that person. I knew the logistics for every little thing that happened at both the pro show and the amateur show. I was a big part of the pro show. I did a lot of behind the work stuff for Bob too. And Bob never had to worry about any of that stuff. You know, Bob made a lot of decisions, and it was up to people, good people, to execute the decisions that Bob made.
Right.
And that's what leadership is. Right. I see no leadership in what's going on now, period. And I can tell you that from being there last year. I knew all the things that had to be done. And I was walking around at the Arnold Amateur thinking about the night show and all the things that weren't done.
Right.
I mean, there's the simple stuff. Like, I used to have pallets of water backstage, Dave.
Sure.
They didn't have water backstage. They didn't have simple shit. There was no water backstage.
Not good.
Literally, one of the guys, Steve Grill, who has no business being back there either, as an expediter, he's nothing to do with bodybuilding, shows up with 2 gallons of water in little Dixie cups. I'm like, this is the fucking Arnold? Are you fucking kidding me? I was so pissed, dude. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I was just watching things just fall through the cracks. And there was a couple of times that I just like, I can't watch this. And I just jumped in there and took care of some stuff without even asking or telling anybody. You know, just like stuff like security. Oh,
sure.
The security was so bad. But nobody knew what they were doing, because, of course, the security team that had been there for 20-some, 30-some years was dismissed. And then nobody was communicating with any of these security people. And they're coming to me, because I was the one fixture from the past that a lot of people recognized, and they were coming to me. And I don't think Brian liked that at all.
Would you and Bob ever run another big show in Columbus, like with an expo?
You know what, Bob and I have talked about it. I mean, why not do the Columbus Sports Festival?
Yeah.
You know, we've got Dave, I don't know if you know this or not, I have 6 kids.
No.
So my kids start at 27 and they go all the way down to 7.
You're a glutton for punishment, like I am.
Yeah, but you know what? It provides me with my purpose in life. You know, but
I know.
We're connected to gymnastics and AAU basketball, and I mean all these different things that, you know, we have contacts and all, you know, in the city, and just about anything. And I think that if Bob ever wanted to try to recreate this, you know, I think he could. And I would hope that he would choose, you know, me to be his partner in it. And I'd be in it 100%. My wife and I, Julie, would both be in it 100%. Sure. If Jim Mannion or whatever direction, you know, everything's going to go, who knows? I mean, I'm never going to say never, because I guarantee it's in the back of Bob's mind.
I would imagine now that his dad has passed, you know, he must be thinking, you know, I got to create my own legacy now. And, you know, maybe that's something he might consider doing. You know, I just was thinking about it.
You know, and you know, Dave, I mean, come on, like we said, we've known each other probably for 30 years. This industry is all about relationships.
Absolutely. 100%.
And, you know, it's taking care of people and being good to people, you know, and, you know, there's shit show people in every industry, every walk of life. You know, you got your bad cops, you got your bad politicians, you got, you know, you can nitpick at anything, you know, every industry has its ups and its downs, you know, but at the heart of it, if people put the athletes first and care about, you know, that portion of it, you know, good decisions can be made and everybody could, you know, have an opportunity to excel.
Yeah. I would not want to run the Arnold Sports Festival. I would not want that position. It's got to be an enormous amount of stress. It's got to be, you know, very scary, because you're putting out loads and loads of money, hoping it's going to come back in. You know, that pandemic, you know, was probably the scariest thing that Arnold and his whole team ever faced, because of the fact that you're banking on all this money coming in, and now all of a sudden they're telling you, sorry, no one's showing up.
Yeah. Dave, can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, it was never Arnold's team. There was never Arnold and his team. It was just Arnold.
Right.
Okay. Jim and Bob would communicate to Arnold, and, Arnold would have input into decisions and stuff, but he didn't have a Brian Powers or, Daniel wasn't involved in decisions like that.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? Until that pandemic came along. And I'm not downplaying Arnold's role in anything. Right. But as you know, Arnold kind of shows up and shakes hands and kisses babies. And, he's Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's what he can. And you know what? And he was paid, handsomely to do that. And he deserved that. Anything he got, he deserved 100%.
Well, he brands that show. I mean, that's his brand.
Absolutely.
Arnold loves bodybuilding. We know that. He's like a when you hear him talk about it, it's like hearing like an 18-year-old kid talking about it still. He loves bodybuilding, and that purity is what drew people to Columbus, Ohio every year, because he projected that charisma and energy to the world.
But Dave, make no mistake about it. It was Jim Lorimer and the people in his offices that were doing the work and getting it done. And it was Jim, and it was, and once Bob became president, it was Bob. I mean, I watched Bob, evolve as a person and evolve in the industry and evolve professionally over time, and go from, a gym owner, and kind of a little bit of a meathead to now he's in corporate America, and he's making $1 million deals, and he's dealing with, don't forget, we had one Arnold. It was Bob and Jim who, got with Raphael, took it to Spain and took it to Brazil and took it to South Africa and took it to Australia. It took a lot of work to do all that. And that wasn't Arnold. That wasn't Arnold and Arnold's people. It was Jim and Bob. It really was.
I remember I used to see Bob. I was in airports. I was running into Bob, and he's like, I'm going to Australia now to talk to, Tony Doherty. And
he had that vision. And at first it was, when the IFBB was all, one big thing, and, Jim and Raphael were together and everything. And then when that split came, I mean, that too took a lot of diplomacy.
Sure.
And trying to keep Raphael happier, and Jim was a really good diplomat. That's one thing I would tell anybody about Jim Lorimer, that he's extremely diplomatic, and he knew how to, he knew how to treat people, and he knew how to talk to people.
Right.
And I learned a lot from him when it comes to that kind of stuff. But again, it was Jim, it was Bob, it was Lucy Penny in the office. It was, it was the 4 or 5 people in there who were working, Liz Green and Stephanie, some of the girls that have been in there over the years.
Love Liz Green.
Yeah, Liz was extremely organized, and she was a big part of the event for years.
Liz, this is a true story. We were on a bus. I can't even remember what country we were in, but it was my wife who was I don't know if we were married at the time. It was my wife, me, Bob was there, Liz, and I forget who else. And we shared this like bus ride with them, and we would chat. And Liz was pregnant at the time, and she was still working till like the week or two before she gave birth. And my wife and her became really good friends, during that trip. But that's how dedicated, they were to what they were doing,
Yeah, and that's the thing that people should know is that, you're not going to replace that by bringing in a Brian Powers because he did Comic-Con. Because Brian doesn't have the relationships here. He doesn't know the Joe Shaws like we know the Joe Shaws. He doesn't have 300 volunteers showing up. I mean, on average, there were 300 people who would volunteer to just be there at the Arnold Sports Festival doing whatever needed done. Right. Whether it was, putting wristbands on people or being part of the medical team or being, anything and everything that was, people would just sign up in droves to volunteer to help that Lorimer family out.
Right. So
you're never going to have that again. You're never.
What's your suggestion? How could this be fixed? Is it fixable at this point or no? Would you ever go back there and work for them if they asked you?
You're going to think this is funny, but Arnold was here for Jim's funeral. Mm-hmm. And I've never been awestruck of Arnold, and I'll tell you why. Because Arnold's been around here so much.
Sure.
To be honest with you, he's been in my gym. He's, worked out, come in, and everybody kind of, would leave him alone and respect his privacy. And, I've been in rooms with him. I've been at lunches with him, laughing, talking, whatever. Had I had 5 minutes and Arnold would have spoken to me for 5 minutes, I would have said to him, I would have literally said to him, dude, what are you doing? You know, Jim just passed away. What are we doing here? Is this about money? Because if it's all about money, then you know what? Pick it up and take it and go to Santa Monica and do it in your backyard.
Sure.
But this is something that you built here for 34 years with this family. And it basically is this family, the Lorimer family's legacy and identity. And that is all gone now over money. Come on, man. Honestly, I mean, we can do better than that. I mean, the sport itself deserves to have that event be first class. Listen, the Olympia is the Super Bowl, but gosh damn it, the Arnold's the NFC Championship game.
Yep.
You know, it's the second best thing in the world. And you know, and the fact that they duplicated it on all those different continents, and at times those shows were thriving too, Dave. I mean, how could anybody ever argue that? You know, and if it's about money and it's about, you know, oh, the misappropriation of funds, or you don't trust this people, then let's all get in a room and talk. Let's hammer it out. Let's get, you know, let's get Arnold himself in the room. And if he wants to bring Daniel or whatever, that's fine. Get Bob in there. Let's, you know, if you want to bring your henchmen, you know, bring them. But, you know, I think this could have all been worked out.
Yeah.
You know, I really do. But now, I don't know. There's no contract for 2024 from what I understand from my sources here in Columbus.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying that, you know, that's the truth either. Just like we can speculate about what happened with the Arnold Amateur. You know, like you said, you know, Gary's proven. I mean, no one's going to argue that Gary's not a proven promoter.
Yeah, he can.
You know, but I know that Gary was going to have some issues, or it was going to be hard to go to Brian and say, hey, I need this, because that's stuff they weren't used to paying for.
Sure.
Now, all of a sudden, you're bringing in another team to execute a show. You're going to have to pay those people, and rightfully so. You know, rightfully so. Gary's not going to come to Columbus, Ohio and find, you know, the 25 or 30 volunteers that I had at, you know, my beck and call during, you know, the week of the Arnold.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's like a national holiday here in Columbus, dude.
Yeah. It would be a shame if they moved the Arnold out of there, because the revenue stream that it brings to this, that community there would be devastating, I would think. Right.
Yeah. I mean, the year it canceled, what, you know, the local economy, it hurt a lot of people, especially in like the restaurant and the food industry and all that.
Right.
I remember being the only person in the restaurant at the Hyatt.
Wow.
Okay. The morning of the show, I was the only one. And you know, that restaurant was always packed.
Oh, yeah, packed to the hilt.
And they had one waiter on thing. And, you know, I talked to him every day, and I literally tipped that guy, I think $40 every day. He said, listen, we literally fight for these slots, and we'll come down here and we'll work 12 hours a day, because the Arnold is the greatest week of the year for all of us. Yeah. We'll walk out of here with $15,000 to $20,000. It makes our year.
It's crazy.
And we're talking about wait staff, you know, you know, and that was gone. And then it was gone the next year, you know. They
built hotels just for the Arnold Classic. I mean, a lot of those hotels were not there when we first came there in the 90s. They built all that.
Well, those two Hilton, listen, they just built 140. I think it's they said it at Jim's funeral. Actually, I think it's $146 million Hilton connected to the convention center that is opening prior to this year's event.
Where did they put that thing?
It's like down on the north end of the D Hall. It's down like connected. It's, you know, it's kind of the same situation where it's connected, you know, by a walkway.
I love the other walkways. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's incredible, but you know, they built that with, you know, of course, the Arnold Classic business in mind, 100% in mind.
Yep.
You know, I don't know. I just I think it would take Arnold himself to basically, you know, take a step back and look at the big picture and reconnect with the Lorimer family. And I honestly believe that. You know, people can say anything or speculate anything about, you know, Jim or Bob or relationships here or there or whatever. At the end of the day, for 34 years, that thing ran seamlessly.
Yep.
And you can't say that now because of just the changes in itself throw up red flags to all of us, especially us diehards.
Yep.
Or any of us people who have been involved, you know, over all the years, that, okay, there's something definitely wrong here. Just like you said, from canceling, you know, divisions and now canceling a big international event. I mean, in its heyday, you know, Dave, I had I think the most I ever had was 82 countries represented.
Shoot, that's crazy.
But even at that, you know, part of my volunteer base I would have interpreters just knocking down the door to come and help me out. You know, I get an Arabic speaker, I get a Portuguese speaker, I get a Spanish speaker, I get French, you know, German. Yeah. The only thing I ever had a problem with was finding somebody who could speak Russian. But then I found this Ukrainian girl who could do it quite well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was just.
Hey, you know what? I'm sorry that you're not in there anymore, because you know what? It was you were really a fixture in there just as much as the Lorimer's were, because everyone knew Mike Davies ran that amateur show, and I only heard raving reviews about that show. And when I went there, it was run like it was a pro show. I mean, so
right. And I appreciate that. I really do.
I'm sad to hear that, number one, you're not in there, and I'm very sad to hear that they're not even holding it this year. So that's.
Well, you know what? A lot of people. I can't tell you the number of DMs and text messages and phone calls I've taken over the last 48 hours since it kind of really hit. And I think a lot of people think that I'm going to be like, oh, you're vindicated. I'm not vindicated, because you know what?
You're a man for the athlete. You want
That's right. And you know what? I can go right now. You know, I've got, I don't know how many apps, maybe 6 or 7. I got WeChat and Signal and WhatsApp and all these, because that's how everybody internationally communicates. Yeah. And so many people didn't even know I wasn't involved, and they were still contacting me, asking me to help them with their visas and all that stuff. And I was just, you know, and I hated doing it, but you know, hey, respectfully, you need to take your concerns to Gary Udit. You know, go to GaryUdit.com. Gary's now the promoter. And you know, as much as I hated to say that, you know, what was he going to do? Ignore him? No, because at the end of the day, for me, it was always about the athletes. Right. And, you know, like I said, this was never some huge moneymaker for Bob or myself. It wasn't. We were partners in it at the beginning. It was never a huge moneymaker just because of the way it was set up. Hey, if I would have got the gate.
But some of the events at the Arnold are not necessarily going to be the most profitable. You do them because it's necessary.
That's right.
In a context of the show he's holding. I'm sure certain events make a ton of money, and then other probably events lose money. And at the end of the day, it evens out. And I'm sure the expo makes money at the end. You know, the whole festival makes money. But some things are going to be loss leaders sometimes. You know, and some years are not going to be as successful as other years, right?
Yeah, fencing's not making a bunch of money, and fencing's not bringing in a bunch of people to watch. You know what I'm saying? But the difference between the Arnold Amateur and all those types of sports is, listen, you could pay for a $15 expo ticket and you could see 15 different sports. You could go to powerlifting, cheerleading, whatever. Yeah. We did have a separate ticket media, and that ticket media went right to Arnold. And that's what makes me sick about this Brian Powers and the way he approached me and the way he, you know, accused us of having this secret show or whatever, when I damn well know that all that gate money and receipts were going to the Arnold Classic, Arnold Productions. And that's, you know, and that's okay. And I didn't you know what, Dave, I didn't care.
Sure.
I didn't care. I did not care one bit that money went to them. You know why? Because, you know, that's for the good of the sport. That was for the good of the whole, that was for the good of the community or whatever it took.
I really hope that Arnold can use his charisma and maybe rekindle some relationships and fix, you know, mend some hurt, you know, people and just, you know what, make it work for the sake of the sport, you know, because of that whole town, because of that whole entity. I mean, that Arnold Classic energy was infused, not with just Arnold, but with the Lorimers and with guys like you and all the people who worked there. And I knew every personality. Every person was the same every single year. What's the big guy's name who's
Big Mike? Big Mike.
Mike.
Yeah.
I know him for so many years, and he was breaking my balls the first couple of years that I actually met him. And we became like best friends after that. And we would sit and talk for like hours, you know, because
and again,
they were the same people every year. Same thing with Mike, with Lors too. Matt Lors, excuse me.
Yeah. But so now we're all gone. I mean, I literally was like I was the last of the Mohicans, bro. I'm out, you know, which sucks. But I got to tell you that, that part is really sad because, you know, again, that's like a national holiday. You know, Mike didn't do it for the money. Mike did it because he loved doing it. Yeah. You know, it wasn't fun to manage all those different people for that one weekend and try to find all these people to come in and do a
day long. He was there. He was there for hours, that guy, every single day.
Mike was there almost as long as me. If I was there on the floor at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, Mike would be there at 7. He's an hour behind me. And then his people were on shift an hour after that, you know. And Mike was one of the last people to leave every night. And, you know, while I'm sweeping up the floor and, you know, picking up, people's
I
garbage.
remember because I would be like doing my final wrap ups and taking video, and he'd still be there, and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm leaving." I'm like, "All right, yeah, me too." We walk out together,
Yeah. The one thing that you can take from this is that nobody's ever it's never going to be the same without the Lorimer family involved. It's not. Yeah. Nobody's going to care about it like what Jim did, and Jim cared passionately to the day he died. Listen, the last time I saw Jim alive, Jim was staying in a home basically 3 miles from my house. Okay. So on Wednesdays and Fridays, I go to mass at Holy Family downtown at noon, and I would drive by there. And a lot of times I would just stop. 8 out of 10 times Jim would be asleep in his bed at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
He wasn't feeling well. People don't know.
He was 96 years old.
96 years old, whatever. The last time I went there, he pretty much had somebody with him 24/7. Yeah. Jody, which was a family friend, was there. And I sat down and I spoke to her for like 30 minutes. We just sat there talking and shooting the shit. Right. And Jim wakes up. Okay. Jim wakes up and his eyes pop wide open. He goes, "Mike." And I was like, "Jim, what's up?" And he's like, "How's Julie and the kids?" Wow. I was like, "Hey, they're great. I mean, they're awesome." And he goes, "How's the gym? What's going on? You still training? You still training all those girls? You still, yeah, Jim." Yeah. We had a conversation, Dave. It was like 15 years ago, and I was sitting across from him in his office.
Wow.
And he asked me, "Are you and Bob still getting along? You guys still, you're still doing your thing?" And he just asked me all these questions, and he was so for a brief second there, he was vibrant and alive again. Yeah, and awesome. I walked out of there and I called my wife Julie, and I had tears in my eyes. I just had the greatest conversation with Jim for 45 minutes. It was like 15 years ago.
That's awesome.
And you know what? I was so blessed to have that. And I walked away there telling myself, I'm not going back. Right. Because that's what I wanted to remember. Mm-hmm. And all of this just, it hurts. Like I said, a lot of us are bitter. It hurts to the core. It hurts me to see Bob, excommunicated from all this. And basically a lot of people, want to point the finger. Oh, it's Bob did this. Bob did it. Bob didn't do anything but bust his ass and try to carry on the legacy and take over for something that grew exponentially under his watch. I mean, what Bob did for that expo in the 10 years that he was the president of Classic Productions, nobody can argue. I mean, he took that one show and made it global. I mean, took it to all those different countries. And it just, I mean, come on. How can you argue with that?
Sure.
That wasn't Arnold's people. That wasn't Brian Powers who just jumped in last year or whatever. That was Bob Lorimer. And people can think what they want. That's bullshit. I know the truth.
I really
know how. And you, like you said, you saw them all tripping all over the country too. Yeah, you can agree or disagree with some of the decisions Bob made. Whatever. Bob was in it for his family and in it for the sport. And if he had another opportunity, I think he could redo it. I think he could do it again. Mm-hmm. And I wish Arnold would just take a big step back and realize the direction that the Arnold Classic is now going. And is it going to affect his legacy? You know what I'm saying? Is this what you want, Arnold? Is how you want to perceive this huge sports festival that you have been a part of for all these years, and that Jim started and Bob carried it along, and now what is it? I mean, a lot of people are questioning what is the Arnold Sports Festival now. Like you said, is what happened to the physique sports? The foundation of this thing is still physique sports. It's still bodybuilding.
The problem. Look what happened with Gold's Gym when it was sold.
Boom. That's a great example. That's a great example.
Sold to a hotel chain, and they didn't know anything about bodybuilding or working out. And
your market.
It went right into the toilet bowl because the people look at what happens when they sold EAS or Metrex. These big companies that in the 90s were huge mega companies. They get sold to like a drug company, and they don't know what to do with it. And they get rid of the best products because they think, well, they cost too much to make. Right. The heart of the Arnold Classic is the spirit of the people that were running it, and that includes Arnold, it includes the Lorimer family and all the people who were there. That was the energy of the whole thing. When you get rid of those people, you get rid of the energy, and it changes. And it might change to something better. I don't know down the road, but that home, I felt like I was at home when I would get there every year in Columbus, Ohio, and I'd arrive. I'm like, oh, my family, my second family is here. This is this is, I couldn't wait to come every single year. And it was,
well, everybody, you know, Dave, like you said, like people like Big Mike and stuff like that, everybody knew your name.
Yeah.
You know, when you went to get your badges and stuff, the Walburn family was there and they took care of you because they knew you. You didn't have to worry about it. You know,
I had Matt Lord on cell phone. I was texting him and I'd be like, hey, Matt, I need this, I need that. And it was that was the spirit of the show, you know.
Dave, you know, last year I had to call, you know, one of the Arnold, you know, people, Brent, to get my credentials. Brent who's been there for 34 years and go down there and nobody knows who the fuck I am. Great. Congratulations. I've been here for 34 fucking years. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that shit, I try not to get pissed, but there's a couple of times I got pissed, you know, when, you know, I don't know, dude.
Look, this interview is great because we're putting it out there. Maybe that energy we put out there will come back and Arnold will revisit everything we said. And, you know, maybe it'll mend some relationships, because it needs to happen, you know.
It does. You know, it's about leadership and, you know, without sounding like I got a vendetta or whatever, you know, I just don't think that, you know, the leadership that's trying to run this thing now has any idea, and they don't care about, you know, like I said, the legacy and basically the foundation of what the Arnold is, which is physique sports.
Yes.
You know, and when you started cutting shit like figure out, you know, okay, we can all argue about, you know, the look of the women and women's physique or women's bodybuilding, and it's not conducive, and Arnold doesn't like it or whatever. You know, but you know, like you said, the 212. I love the 212 division. It's one of my favorite divisions.
Figure,
you know,
that was the foundation of that for years.
Well, it did. It went, you know, it women's bodybuilding, men's bodybuilding, fitness, figure. The next one up was figure.
Right.
You know, if you're going to cut some things, you know, why is it going to be basically the foundational sport? I mean,
you had 12 girls in it every year. The best 12 in the world. I mean, it wasn't like it was a huge expense, you know.
Yeah.
So,
well, speaking of that, I'm not to change the subject, but I'm real curious as how they're going to run the Olympia. I mean, I'm on my way out there this week, and I'm freaking out a little bit because I got people in the show, and there's 78 guys in one of my guys' class, and there's like 80 in one of the other guys. I mean,
I'm happy. I'm not judging. That's all I know, man. I told them they should do an elimination round on Thursday just to get rid of some of the people.
Well, they're going to. I mean, that's what I think they're going to have to do. I mean,
yeah.
Every men's physique guy is going to get a chance to go out there and do his 30-second thing or whatever, and then what are you going to do? Bring them out in groups of 10 and then cut it to 15 like it was when you did. You know, bodybuilding. It'd be
like the old Night of Champions. Remember, we used to go to Night of Champions. Yeah. There was like 60 people in the show.
Yeah. At the Beacon Theater, you have to take the spiral staircase down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what? Maine had an awesome show back then. I mean, Night of Champions was like,
well, it was only
the Olympia, the Arnold, and the Night of Champions.
Right. Well, it was only bodybuilding, so we didn't have to sit through 50 different divisions. But you know, I know. Look, I'm all for change and evolving and all that stuff. But you know, I think it's because they held the Olympia later, and it was a very long period from Olympia to Olympia, so they have a lot more people who qualified. You're not going to see this again next year. It happens.
No,
so
you can't. I don't know how. I don't know how Jay can afford it.
Yeah, it's a big expense.
It's
all right. We're gonna wrap this up. But Mike, I appreciate you coming on and being so honest and telling us all what actually happened behind the scenes, because a lot of people didn't know. I think most people didn't know, and this is important that people understand what was going on and what happened. And I hope the whole relationship can be mended at some point, because I don't believe that you can't go back. I think you can go back and you can make it better. And Arnold is the man who can facilitate that. Absolutely, because he's got that kind of charisma and he's that kind of power. So I hope.
And I agree. And a lot of times I wonder how much Arnold knows and what he doesn't know, and what's important to him and what's not important to him. But you know, I would think that his legacy in the sport of bodybuilding is in many ways linked now to the Arnold Sports Festivals, not only here but worldwide.
Sure.
You know, and that started with Jim, and you know, whether he disagrees or wants to, you know. You don't have to like everybody that you do business with. It's business.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And let's just come together and get the right people in the right spots and make this thing, you know, to coin a phrase, great again. Make it great again.
Yeah.
And it just hasn't been great the last couple of years. And, you know, we can blame the pandemic. We can blame a lot of different things. But let's get the right people in place and let's talk about moving forward. And, you know, whether that involves the Lorimers or not, I mean, I hope it does. I would love it. And I would be right there beside Bob, helping him every step of the way. 100%.
Thank you, Mike.
Now, I appreciate the platform today. I really appreciate you, man. We've known each other forever.
Yeah.
You know, we've never had to come to each other for anything, and I appreciate you giving me the platform.
Absolutely. And guys, that's going to take us to the end of another RX Muscle exclusive. I'm Dave Palumbo with Mike Davies. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.